So to draw a dragon's eye, I would recommend, when you're getting your crayons, I would recommend a dark color. So either like a dark green or a dark blue or a violet, something really dark. You don't want to do like the yellow or an orange, because yeah, black is fine. You don't want to use like a super light color. It's just hard to get the shading in for those. Okay, so the very first thing I'm going to do, if you'll follow along just kind of one step at a time, I will try not to leave you behind, but you can kind of look up here and see where we're going. So for the very first line, I am going to draw kind of like a squished rainbow. And I usually like to have it come out both sides. So just like a curve right in the middle of your paper, going almost all the way across. So if you're trying to figure out how big that needs to be, almost all the way across your paper. And one more tip, something that I like to do sometimes is, if I'm not sure about how big or where it needs to go, you can draw it out with your finger first. You can draw it out with your finger and then decide if you thought it was too big or too little. Because we're getting ready to make that same line that we're doing, we're going to do it underneath. So drawing it out with your fingers sometimes is a really good way to decide if you're going to do it correctly. So the next line is going to go underneath.
Yep. You start right at like the point of the other.
Yeah, and if you left a little gap, it would be fine too. But yeah, I usually do about the point of the other one. So we're going to make this look like an eyeball. So we need to complete the two sides to make it have like an iris in it. Oh, my daughter's name, Iris. So I'm going to add like a, kind of like a part of a circle here and part of a circle here. Like the eyeball is in there. Like that's like the white part of the eye and then the iris right in the center. And because this is like a dragon or a lizard or maybe something a little bit mythical, we're going to make the pupil in this kind of a little bit spooky. Yes, diamond. A little bit spooky, a little bit different.
Creepy. Okay. What can I do with that? I can do it.
So on this one, I'm using a green crayon. I would still go in and color this area of the pupil. I would still do that very dark black. That's going to be like a very dark area. So later, when I'm coloring this in, I would go in and color that black. Now, you may notice on this area, I have a little bitty crescent moon shape. I left that in there to kind of be like a really nice natural highlight, because when you talk about drawing eyes, you want to draw that little highlight you see. It just makes things look more realistic. So, to draw that crescent moon, I just kind of make a little hump over here and then a bigger one on top of it. Join them together. And that reminds me not to draw in that area. Yes, sir. Do what? Oh, for that part? Yeah. Okay, I'll let you have one when it's time to color it in.
Is it okay if we're using pencil? Because I mess up a lot.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Pencil's fine. Okay, now we're ready to move on to the layers of the scales. So I'm going to copy this line right here. I'm looking at this line that I just made to start with, and I'm going to copy that line, but I'm going to do it again like above it. So it's basically the same line, it's just bigger and on top of it. So give yourself some space from here to here, because the scales are actually going to be in between this.
So we do it all the way across the paper?
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much all the way across. And I'm going to copy that line again underneath. Copy here. So now it looks like our eye is totally surrounded. And in a minute, we're going to talk about scales. But right now, we're just making like the, just like the little pathway for the scales are going to be. Okay, so I'm going to copy that one more time, above and below. So I'm going to do a line at the top and the bottom again. I'm going to copy that line. If it runs off the edge of the page, just kind of let it be where it would naturally go. So now I've got 2 rows of scales on the bottom and 2 rows of scales on the top. So let's take a break and talk about the scales. A lot of times, especially when you're like drawing, and you're a little kid and you're thinking about a brick wall, you know how you take the lines, oops, let me find a marker that's marking a little bit better. You know how you're taking a line on a brick wall. So if I was gonna make bricks, I would just do like this. Well, that looks fine for bricks because bricks are, you know, squared off on the edges. That on the scales doesn't really look very realistic. So we want to take a different approach to it. So I'm gonna draw this bigger for you to see it up close. Okay, so let's pretend that this is one of my rows. This is one of my rows here on the bottom. For the scale, you still want them to be kind of like a square, but you want to round off those edges. You see how it's still kind of like a square?
So it's circular.
So it's kind of circular, yeah, but you definitely don't want to do this either. Like that's too quick. Like that's not what you're going for either. Yeah, that's too lazy. And we want to get these really close together, touching each other. Oh my gosh, you said it looks like a tooth. It really does. It looks like teeth. Yeah. So each one of these is like its own, not this one. This is not the appropriate one. Not this one. And you definitely don't want to start doing this either. Those aren't the right way either. That's what makes this project a little more advanced, is because each one is its own shape that you had to like really think about drawing. So if we take that idea, if we take the idea of drawing these rounded off squares, you just start drawing them on this row, on the row on top of that, and all the bottom rows. Save these corners for later. Save those corners for later. So you just kind of start somewhere. Just start kind of drawing in those circles. Not really circles. Circle's not the word. Square's not the word either. We should make up a word for that. Gumdrops. Yeah.
Marshmallows.
So you want it to make it look like a scale, not, you know, not a brick wall. So go ahead and start filling in some of those shapes. And be sure that they do touch each other. You don't want to leave gaps in the middle. Later, we're going to go in and shade these to make them look like they have a 3D effect. And that's where I think crayons like help you out a little bit, because when you're doing colored pencil, it makes it a little bit harder, but still fun. And obviously, you know, the more time you take on an art project, yeah, I mean, you're trying more, and the nicer, fancier it looks. Like, people can tell when you really put a lot of care and a lot of effort into something.
Not just circles.
Yeah, not just circles, not just a brick wall. Because I could definitely teach the little kids how to do this, but theirs would look a lot more like a brick wall.
Is it okay if one of your scales is like, it's kind of hard?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and see, like this one, I made a little, that scale right there was a little too rounded for me, but you know what, I'm leaving it. It's just the way it is.
I mean, even if you do look one like a lizard,
Yeah,
their
I mean,
scales
they're
don't,
not perfect either.
they look like squiggles.
Is it okay if you leave like gaps? Well, I mean like, I can't, like if you had like a mouth, like the part where you can see your gum, like the little kind of.
Right, totally fine. So are you talking about that part like right there on the inside of your eye?
Oh no, like look at that too. Down there, like the middle part, yeah, that.
Right now, I'm leaving that one totally white. I haven't decided if I'm gonna go back in and color those areas black, because I'm kind of liking the white part. 'Cause it makes
I'm
the,
not sure, like, is it okay if we have like.
yeah, mine's like that too. I'm not sure if I want to go back in and make that completely darkened. I don't know, I can't decide yet.
I think the bigger the squares are, the easier it is.
I think so too.
Because once I get to like the ends, because I started at the end just to be miserable.
Right. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and talk about shading just for a minute, but you don't have to be finished with the scale part for this, so take a break from the scales. Let's talk about shading. When you're shading an object, how do I make this, or how do I make a colored pencil lighter and darker? Using the exact same one, how would I make it lighter and darker? How would I do that?
Use a color lighter with it.
So if I color lighter, how could we put that in words that somebody would understand?
Heavies, darker, lighters.
So heavier means what? Like more pushing down?
Mm-hmm.
Like more pressure?
Color.
More pressure.
Less pressure for.
Less pressure. And one way you can get less pressure is, this is kind of like my little secret, is if you actually hold closer to the end of it and then just barely kind of color, that's really light pressure. And when you are holding close to the tip of your crayon or your color pencil, that's pretty intense. Like you are writing very controlled. But when you like scoot your hand back a little bit, you can have a lot of different pressure. So I'm gonna put dark pressure. I'll use my biggest scale right here so you can see it. So I'm gonna put dark pressure on the edge of this scale. So I'm trying not to leave any white spaces all on the edge of this. Then, after I've done like a dark area on the edges, I'm gonna back up a little bit and add less pressure in these middle areas, trying to blend those together. And in the center, I'm gonna leave it just completely white, kind of like it's another highlight. And I'm blending those together. Okay, all that work, that was one scale. I need to do that again and again and again, over and over and over. That's why this project takes a while. It's because each individual scale needs its own attention. So first you gotta draw those scales, then you gotta go back and add the pressure in there to make each one have a 3D effect.